Sometimes war does work. I know war is shocking and horrible and all that, but I tell you, there's sometimes worse things than fighting a war, including losing one. From the day that Israel was attacked by Hamas terrorists a year ago, Israel has been told, restrain yourself. Don't turn this into a war. America has said that, Britain has said that, the United Nations has said it, and Australia has said it again and again to Israel. Even last week, after Iran had fired 181 ballistic missiles at Israel in a single day.
Israel, of course, has a right to defend itself. What we have called for consistently is for a de-escalation in the region. Diplomacy, however, cannot succeed amid an escalation of this conflict.
Israel has consistently ignored them. Even today, it was sending more weaponry into Gaza to deal with remaining Hamas terrorists there. And now comes a poll just to remind us that in the Middle East, at least, it is force that gets you respect and safety. You take this new poll. Well, back in December, the respected Arab World for Research and Development, based in the Palestinian city of Ramallah, polled people in the West Bank and Gaza, Palestinians, and found that 75% supported that massacre on October 7th. 90% wanted no coexistence with Israel. And 76% backed Hamas, which is all shocking. But what a difference a war has made, a war Israel is winning. Because since then, Israel has ignored Australia and the US and the UN and destroyed most of the Hamas terrorist army, taken out almost the entire leadership of the Hezbollah terrorist army in Lebanon. And now that same polling group has done another poll and found support for the October 7 massacre has dropped to 67%, still high, but a third of them now admit the attack was flawed or involved heinous or criminal acts. But most striking is that 80% of Palestinians polled now want, albeit grudgingly, a Palestinian state to live alongside Israel. And just 8% said they'd vote for Hamas. 8%. Joining me from Tel Aviv, in Israel, of course, is Colonel Richard Kemp, a retired British Army officer who's commanded Operation Fingal in Afghanistan and has studied the Israeli Army's war tactics and been to most of the fronts now. Richard, great to see you again. Listen, Israel's war, is it working?
It is working, and it's working extremely effectively. It's taken a long time, a year now, pretty much, but it is gradually succeeding, and Israel has defeated Hamas in Gaza. Hamas in Gaza is no longer a significant threat to Israel. That doesn't mean it's been eliminated. There's still a lot of work to do there to get rid of Hamas completely, as far as that can be done. But it's been very successful in the most complicated battlefield the world's ever seen. And in the north, in Lebanon, Hezbollah has been decapitated, and Israel is now working very, very effectively in southern Lebanon on the ground to destroy the Hezbollah apparatus, and in the air as well to destroy some of the rocket systems and other infrastructure further north. Of course, the next major problem for Israel to tackle is Iran, and we don't know what Israel's response is going to be to the Iranian bombardment a few days ago, but it's going to be something, I think, quite decisive.
Now, Richard, as you know, there are two elements to this, and you sort of hinted at it in your answer there. One is the military assets and the people holding the guns right now. The other is the people's will to keep supplying fresh recruits and support and let them take control of the territory and all that kind of thing. It applies to Gaza, it applies to Lebanon, the Hezbollah that's taken over a third of Lebanon there. The first bit, I agree with you. Do you think, though, that the popular will in Gaza and in Lebanon is now not for those terrorist armies, but working against it? Like, what calamity have these people brought to us?
Well, I think there's an element of that, but it's very hard to assess exactly how strong that is. Hamas do still have considerable control, political control, inside Gaza. And it's hard to eradicate that. One of the major tools they have at their disposal is they have control of aid supplies, which are critical to obviously to all the people, and they have to therefore kowtow really to Hamas in order to get the aid that the international community delivered. But I think only once Hamas has been much more strongly defeated in Gaza are we likely to see any significant change. If we do, I think that there's going to be a problem from Gaza for many years to come. Up in the north, in Lebanon, I've certainly heard of indications that there is movement against Hezbollah now. Even some Lebanese politicians are speaking out against Hezbollah who didn't do so before. And that could lead to them being undermined if Israel is successful at inflicting even greater harm on Hezbollah than they have now. But I don't think either of these two problems are going to be soluble by military force alone. Military force is critical, and only once these organizations have been neutralized to a large extent can there be any real significant political change in either of those two territories.
And of course, there's one other factor in the culture of these groups. Shame is also very important. If you're weak, if you fail, you've been shamed, and that makes you less attractive as a recruiting agent. Richard Kemp, people will be saying, how dare you say Israel's winning the war? What about all the deaths of these civilians? What's your response to that?
Yeah, I agree. It's tragic. There's been a very large number of civilians killed inside Gaza since the war began, and some in Lebanon as well. But unfortunately, you can't fight a war in the 21st century or even in earlier centuries and not kill civilians when your enemy is fighting from within the civilian population. And that's certainly true of both Hamas and Hezbollah. We've seen footage recently of rockets inside people's houses in Lebanon, and also, of course, the Hamas infrastructure spreads through a lot of the civilian buildings and areas in Gaza, including hospitals, schools, etc. And the IDF has tried. I've been into Gaza myself. I've seen their efforts firsthand. They've done everything they can to get at Hamas while minimizing civilian deaths. But nevertheless, there are still a lot of civilian deaths, unfortunately. I think the most recent analyses of, and it's terrible to reduce human life to statistics, but the most recent analyses of the ratios between civilian and military fatalities in Gaza are very favorable compared to other conflicts, for example, Afghanistan, Iraq, and conflicts more generally, where the ratio of civilian deaths has been much higher than in Gaza today. So, yeah, it's a terrible situation. None of us like it at all, I don't think. Certainly the Israelis don't like it either, but they recognize that you cannot defeat a terrorist threat to you that exists in the civilian population without, unfortunately, killing civilians.
Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you so much indeed for being so generous with your time.